Welcome to another Saturday Satsang. Glad you can join. Today I wanted to start off talking about consciousness, our true nature, what we really are, and point out that it's very easy for the mind to get for thinking. When we use the word mind, it can be used in one of two ways. Often we use the word mind synonymous with thinking. But really, when you look at mind from a different perspective, mind is that in which a lot more than thinking arises. The whole experience is actually arising in mind, and mind can be silent. So the reason that mind and thinking have become interconnected, synonymous words is because most of the things that we are aware of, or that there is awareness of, appear to be outside. And the thoughts don't appear to be outside. The thoughts appear in what we might say is mind, and so therefore we think that the only things that appear in mind are thoughts, and so then thoughts and mind, the word, we have a busy mind, or the mind might get involved with what is going on. We've come to use the word mind interchangeably with thoughts. But it's important for us to consider that mind actually might be very different in nature to a thought. That the nature of mind is not thought, but rather awareness. And because thoughts are objects that there is awareness of, we are aware of our thinking, that is an object. Thoughts are objects essentially arising in mind, and therefore the mind becomes aware of those objects that arise inside mind. But the objects are not mind itself. If we look at a particular object that arises in mind and think that that particular object is all that mind is, we may actually have a wrong idea of what mind is. Now, I started off saying I'm going to be talking about consciousness, what we really are, and you might say, well, why are we talking about mind? It turns out that mind is not different from consciousness, not different from awareness. And when we talk about our true nature is mind. That doesn't mean that our true nature is thinking, because in this context, I'm not using the word mind as synonymous with thinking. I'm using the word mind as the container in which thinking happens. Thinking being just one of many objects that all arise in mind. However, it doesn't appear that the variety of other objects that arise in mind don't appear to arise in mind. They appear to arise outside. So if we can start to reconsider our definition of mind, and maybe because we have a new definition of mind, that might act as a pointer for us to become aware of mind as that which is aware of all objects that arise. There isn't an object in your life experience, meaning any time during the day, there is no object, be it a tangible object like a table or a chair or a plant or another person, or an intangible object like a sense, a feeling, an emotion, a thought. There isn't any object, tangible or intangible, that you are aware of, and if you see a dog, then there is awareness of the dog, that isn't arising in mind. So put differently, everything you are aware of has to be arising in mind. It might not appear like that's the case, but that would be one of the rules that I'm putting out. And if you feel the inclination to take it as something to explore, then you can follow that rule and say, okay, this is the rule, let me try and become aware of things as described by the rule. And the rule is everything that we are aware of cannot not be outside, cannot not be in mind. Meaning, everything we're aware of is actually arising in mind. And mind, the nature of mind, is awareness. The nature of mind is creativity, meaning the object, the experience, is a creation of mind, recognized or awared by the very mind in which that creation has arisen, a creation created by the mind in which it arises, recognized by the mind in which it arises. Nothing exists outside of mind. So this also means maybe we need to, in redefining our definition of mind, understand that mind may not refer to something belonging to the body. What the rule says is that the body which there is clearly awareness of must be arising in mind. Nothing that we are aware of throughout the day or from time to time during the day is outside of mind. Now, as it appears, the mind exists inside the body as part of, let's say, the brain. Now, if we take the rule that anything that we are aware of is arising in mind, we may have to then question and say, oh, well, actually, maybe the body is arising in mind rather than the mind arising in the body. Now, this is useful, this exploration, and potentially the exploration can lead to a spontaneous realization of something. Not necessarily a realization that the person or the body has, but a realization that may be a realization that what we are is mind, and that mind is primal, is fundamental, and that the body and the world of form or apparent form is all secondary. So these descriptions are not descriptions that we should remember as sort of rote-learnt memory, and then just carry it around as learnt knowledge or learnt information. It doesn't serve much purpose as that. It's useful to remember what is said simply so that it can be retrieved tomorrow or the day after, as part of looking, using the pointers to help guide the looking such that this realization that what we are is mind. All there is mind. So for that reason, it's useful to remember it. However, the remembering is not something you can dictate. The remembering will happen or it won't. And the inquiry will happen or it won't. And how the inquiry happens and what the consequence of that is, whether there is a realization or whether there's just some frustration, will be what it will be. So if we change the word mind, because if I say all there is mind, everything arises in mind, is made of mind, and is recognized by mind, it doesn't sound very typical Advaita or typical spiritually, like a spiritual wisdom. Because, and the reason it doesn't sound like that is because typically it's not, the word mind isn't used as the word to describe what we truly are, for the very reason that I mentioned at the beginning of this, is that typically we have associated the word mind with thinking. And in fact, spiritual pointers are trying to point us to that which is prior to thinking, that which is aware of the thinking when thinking happens, and continues to be and be aware of itself even when the thinking subsides. And so ordinarily, the wisdom teaching would say all there is consciousness, or all there is awareness. Everything is awareness. What you are is awareness. So how can we get mind and awareness to be interchangeable or synonymous? And the way is to realize that the nature of mind, as I'm describing it, which is not thinking, thinking is just one movement that mind is aware of, the nature of mind is in fact awareness. So you can then choose, knowing that, or appreciating that mind is the word used for that which in practice or experientially is that which is aware. Which is aware of the world that is not separate from it, the world that is not outside it. Now, the phenomena that has happened in mind is happening in mind that keeps the state or the characteristics that I'm describing obscured or hidden. The phenomena that's happening is a freneticness of movement in mind that creates, we could say, an obstruction or an illusion that forces mind to be aware of the world differently. So that's why often the default view of the world is described as misunderstanding. It's a misunderstanding that is there because mind has created the conditions and the experiential arising of life such that it is seen a certain way and therefore by default has to be misunderstood. And that misunderstanding, we could say, is a misunderstanding of duality. What that means is that the seeker or the human being, even before they've become a seeker, takes the experience on face value, and the experience says this is a world of form, and there is you, the person, and there is an objective world outside of you. That is duality, me and a world that I am separate from. And when we say me, we experience ourselves as essentially a physical, emotional, thinking entity. We don't really experience ourselves as a conscious entity, although there is always consciousness, but the fact that there is consciousness until it is appreciated is often there but not appreciated. But the most important point I'm making is that the default position is I am a physical, thinking, emotional entity, a person, an object, in a world of objects, and most of the objects are objects outside of me and separate from me. What is being spoken about today is that actually all there is mind, that the truth, the essence, what is conscious and what we can know ourselves to actually be, know ourselves prior to identification with any form, prior to the identification, the hypnosis with being an object. We are the formless awareness in which the whole experience of the world arises, much like a dream at night arises in a consciousness which once we have fallen into the illusion of taking ourselves as a body, we then say the dream arises in the brain of the human. The dream arises inside mind or consciousness because there is awareness of the dream at night. And it isn't actually a world of form, although from a particular perspective within the dream it is experienced as a world of form. But we all know when we look at a dream that the world of form is really formless. It disappears in an instant. It arises in an instant. A whole valley and mountain range or ocean, parks, gardens can come into existence in a moment and dissolve in a moment, replaced by another dream manifestation. So what appears as form, in essence, is formless, and we could say is mind stuff. It is the stuff of that in which it is arising and not separate from. So the oceans, the forests are made of mind, made of consciousness. All there is consciousness. I'm pointing at a dream. We can say that a dream is all made of mind stuff, but mind stuff is actually what the word consciousness is pointing at. Consciousness, mind is conscious. Mind is conscious of whatever it turns into. And so a dream is a manifestation of mind, which means the mind turns into the dream. And that mind is self-aware, so once the mind turns into a dream, the mind is aware of that dream. And even if the dream includes, as part of that formless manifestation that appears as form, even if it includes a body, and it includes the impression that what I am is the body, that doesn't change the fact that all that really exists is the mind in which the dream is arising. The mind in which the dream is arising is the truth. It is the only reality, we can say. It is the only aspect that is unchanging. So the manifestation, the dream, is particular, and it subsides, and it is continuously changing. The manifestation, the dream, is in motion, and so each moment is separate, is different from the previous moment in content. In principle, it is all mind, so not different, but the content is continually changing. And then one dream, which in itself is always changing, turns into a different dream, which is really just more content of different colors and shapes arising in mind. And when all is said and done, and all of the dreams subside, there is still mind as the container, as that which has the potential to turn into the next manifestation. So if a manifestation, and I'm using the word manifestation in this context because I'm talking about dreams, if the manifestation, i.e. the dream, the next dream, includes what we could call the protagonist, the main character of the dream, and that manifestation includes the sense, I am the main character, I am that person, that body-mind, doesn't actually make it so. It makes it how that dream has been designed to be experienced. So our journey is a journey of revelation, a revelation of the truth. It's a journey of coming to know ourselves as we truly are. And that realization, that revelation, that self-knowing essentially is a awakening from the identification of form, identification as the body, and an awakening to the reality that what I am is formless. What I am is that which is aware of everything and not separate from everything it is aware of. So that is the realization of non-duality, of oneness, of non-separation. It is the shift from the misunderstanding of duality to the understanding of duality. Now, this understanding is not an intellectual understanding, but a realized understanding. And because it is what we could say knowing oneself that reveals the nature of what oneself is, it is often referred to as non-conceptual because it doesn't require thought to be revealed. In fact, the true knowing or understanding, and that knowing or understanding would be written with a capital K or a capital U, which means not intellect or conceptual based knowing or understanding, can only be known outside of thought. It has to be known because it is what we are. And the realization of what we are as mind happens when the movement I was talking about, which is a frenetic movement of thinking, is essentially transcended. And the transcending of that frenetic movement of thinking creates what appears to be a separating or a pulling out of identification with form. revealing the essence that is the truth, which in that revelation there is a knowing, this is what I am. Not what I am, not what the human being is, but what I have always been is prior to the human being. And that is something that each of us can know directly for ourselves, experientially, and prior to any concept. So not knowing it. It's not a knowing, a conceptual knowing. So this frenetic movement of mind that has been set up and put into motion, a bit like a flywheel, heavy wheel that is turned and it gathers momentum and it keeps spinning because of its weight and the momentum it has. Once that's been set in motion, it is going to keep spinning, especially if it is given an extra push in that same direction from time to time. And our thinking is continually feeding back in itself, giving it a push in the same direction. So the thinking movement is frenetic. It's moving at a tremendous pace that creates this identification with form, creates the experience of separation, and essentially completely covers up any frame of reference, any experience of what is being described in the teachings of non-duality, until such time as that starts to reverse, slow down, and then there are glimpses and there are times, days where we can rest in that knowing, where everything I'm speaking about is something you can self-reference. And you might say, oh yeah, the words are great. But you can know beyond the words for yourself that which is being described. So this movement that is frenetic, if we use an example to demonstrate what I'm talking about, if we have a white cardboard circle, and that cardboard circle can spin, and if we put a black dot, or let's make it a black cardboard circle that can spin, and we put a white dot on it. If it's stationary, then there is a white dot, and the white dot can be seen as a white dot on a black background. And so if I was describing the nature of that object as being black circular cardboard with a white dot on it, it would be evident. Yes, that is black circular cardboard with a white dot on it. However, if that cardboard started to spin at a very fast rate, the appearance would be of a white circular line, not a dot, not a yellow, not a white circle on that black background. But because it's spinning very fast, it will appear to be a circular white line. Maybe it might be apparent that it's on a black background that is cardboard, and maybe even the fact that it is a piece of cardboard might be obscured by the fact it's spinning very fast. And so if I were to then talk about the nature of that object as being black piece of round cardboard with a white dot on it, and you were looking at it when it's spinning very fast, you go, well, no, it doesn't look like that. It looks like a white circle. So its true nature is obscured. its true characteristics are obscured because of how they are presenting themselves. And in this case, it's because of movement that it appears to be a white circle instead of a white dot. And the mind, when it is moving very fast in a certain direction, and that direction usually is a direction of making things happen, needing to get things done, needing to have a purpose, needing to achieve. And then the thinking can also then be looking at the past and feeling regret. It can be looking at situations and blaming. So all of those movements of mind create, and included in that, movements of mind that are self-referencing oneself as a body and a world of objects and a world of 3-dimension and a world of time, which is how the experience presents itself. So all of that thinking creates the appearance of the world a certain way and continues to feed back that being the nature of the world, and the world continues to appear that way. And so accompanying any spiritual seeking, a movement of slowing down, what we could call practice happening. It's not really I wouldn't suggest it to the seeker as a practice, but because that can further imply thinking or further feed thinking that continues to feed in to the illusion of a separate self. But if one finds a meditating practice, stopping, a slowing down, a just being aware, if that starts to happen, starts to become something that the system is interested in, something that the system sees a value in, and therefore it starts to happen, that can start to slow down the frenetic mind. So you can have, my point here is, you can have a seeker that is very dedicated, very earnest and motivated. However, they have a frenetic mind that is creating, and humans in general have this frenetic mind, that is creating this strong duality, which means very little sense of self, the true self, very little appreciation of the stillness, the quietness, the beingness, the presence. And so the seeker, even though they are committed and say, this is what's most important, with the best of intentions, if a slowing down doesn't start to happen, then any information that is gathered is simply going to be knowledge on the level of concept, and it's not likely to go deeper, because in order for it to go deeper, we need to start being able to get glimpses of life as the concepts describe, and then that allows the understanding to go deeper, because the world is now, there are cracks appearing in the old version, and there are glimpses of knowing ourselves differently, knowing the world differently. So if the frenetic mind continues at its pace, those cracks, those glimpses won't be possible. And so the understanding just won't be able to go any deeper than lots of book knowledge, essentially. So somewhere a motivation to meditate, but it doesn't have to be meditate. So I hesitate to use the word meditate, but because we have a fixed idea of meditation. In my seeking, I found myself walking. I'd every day for years go for 1 or 2 3-hour walks, and I'd walk around in a daze, in a sense, because there was a stepping out of the world, in a way. No involvement in the world, but rather just aware of the trees, the other people, and even my own, the body that was appearing as mine. There was just a silent awareness of everything that was happening, seeing it all as the predetermined manifestation in this present moment. The dream as it was arising in consciousness in this present moment. So if a bird was seen, it was known to be the content of the dream of life in that present moment for a bird to go flying past. And if a leaf fell, it was known that that was the predetermined manifestation of life in that moment. And so the attitude was that whatever happens in life is the creation happening, the manifestation that ultimately is formless. And it was known as formless because an awakening to the essence, the consciousness I was speaking about, had happened. And so that then started to build on itself as I spent day after day just walking around, essentially in a daze, you could say. But not just a daze, because there was also contemplating happening. And there was an awareness of the contemplating, which essentially is thought about, consciousness or whatever, as also part of the dream of life happening. So just like the bird that appears as a physical object, but known to actually be formless, the thoughts were in essence formless and the same as the bird, but taking, you could say, on the surface level, a different appearance. And so that was a form of meditation. So when I say a meditating needs to happen, it's a slowing down, a stopping of seeing life as we do when we're on the move. So it's slow down. There's a song that I remember back at the time, Jack Johnson's song, and it was exactly this: slow down everybody, you're moving too fast. The frames can't get you when you're moving that fast. And I think the essence of the lyrics is that we can't see that it is frame after frame after frame after frame. If there's a moving fast, it basically means the frames, like if you're being filmed, it becomes one continuous movement that appears to be something that it actually is, something different from what it actually is. And so if we can, as seekers, have some motivation that says, yes, slowing down, just stopping, just being, even if if we stop and there's a sense of nothing's happening, this isn't what, well, I'm stopping, but where's the revelation? And it doesn't happen. So just keep stopping, keep slowing down. It is like training at a gym. You might try to pick up the 30 kilo weight and you think there's no way I can pick up this 30 kilo weight. And so, if you do, someone might say, well, just pick up the half kilo weight or the 1 kilo weight and you might do some work and then try to pick up the 30 kilo weight, and it's like, oh, well, nothing happened. It's a gradual thing. So we need to slow down. Slow down. The standard objective-based movement in life creates attachment to outcomes, creates this obscuring of the true nature of life. And in the slowing down, being that which is prior to thinking, that which is aware of thinking, is very important. Now, how can the freneticness prevents that from being possible? Something that can help is when we consider some of the teaching wisdom pointings and say what you are is prior to being or non-being. What you are is prior to the body or consciousness, as in the concept of I am the body, I am consciousness. And so we might say, no, but what I really am is consciousness. And the teaching says, what you really are is prior to I am the body or I am consciousness. You are neither the body nor consciousness. What it's pointing at is you are not the concept. And identification with thought basically means identification with the concept that is arising. And so when we're seeking, we have a concept, let's say a concept, I am consciousness. My true nature is consciousness. That the teachings have actually given us that concept. And it's very easy for the untrained thinking to then become objectified, identified with that concept. I am consciousness. And the teachings come and say, at that point they say, what you really are is prior to the concept of I am the body or I am consciousness. And the seeker might then realize, oh, I am identified with the concept I am consciousness, thinking that is the truth. It's a movement of thinking that becomes identified with a concept, keeping us identified with thought and knowing ourselves as the thinker. So this essence that we are, this mind, this awareness, exists in the place outside of the interconnected opposites of concepts. So drop any concept of, let's say, you are not male or female. So what are you if you are neither male or female? And what it's not asking you to find another conceptual answer. It's trying to say you are neither male or female and giving the thinking nowhere to go so that it collapses and reveals the essence that we are, that is not conceptually bound. Now, being pushed out of that identification with concepts is a very, very particular movement of the spiritual path. And there are teachings that are simply dedicated to that one very significant awakening shift. And they will not entertain very many concepts whatsoever that are concepts you can put your finger on. They will just say, you know, that's nonsense. So any descriptions of what enlightenment is, or so, you know, in this teaching we might say enlightenment is the end of suffering, and there'll be teachings that say, you know, that's just a concept, it's not true, and they're correct. This teaching itself says that's not the truth. Nothing that is said in the teaching is the truth. They are all pointers. They're all concepts, not the truth. The only truth in the manifestation is the impersonal sense of being. The impersonal sense of I am. That impersonal sense of I am is the essence of that awareness that is outside of the realm of thinking. So these teachings that are and it can be part of this teaching as well, I'm putting it forward now, that point to this, helping us realize that that there is an obsession with an identification with how things are described. As in, if something is, as soon as we label something as good or bad, there is a getting intertwined in the concept that something is good or bad. And so the teachings will often say there is no such thing as good and bad. It is what it is, which is encouraging us to not call something male or female, good, bad, big, small, useful or not useful. And so for a while, as if we're in this movement, we will actually, especially if we start to see the truth of how, so a tree that you might say, oh, that's an odd looking tree. As soon as we call it an odd looking tree, the thinking, though there is an identification with the world in that, as the world as seen through the lens of thought. And what I'm really getting at is, we by and large haven't lived life outside of through the lens of thought from birth, essentially, or very young age after thinking starts. And there is what is a much more direct knowing of the world, which is where we just see the world directly, because the labeling, the thinking about the world has slowed down. And so if that happens, then there is a revelation, oh, life can be known directly. The awareness that is here knows life directly prior to any thinking about it. And so that's when our tendency to think starts to get interfered. It's like, I don't need to think. I don't need to know life. I don't need to have understanding of how things work. I just need to know life directly. And so that means awareness of the tree that is, it's not even a tree. It just is what it is. So this, I mentioned last week that in the Old Testament, God presented in the form of the burning bush, and when asked by Moses, "Who are you?" the answer is, "I am that I am." You see, so no, I am a tree, or I am a burning bush, or I am God. Just I am that I am. It's like looking at the world And when I mean the world, I don't mean looking at the world that you can't see, like Afghanistan or Paris or London. Looking at the world that is the world in front of you, the tree right there, and looking at it, it is what it is, not it is a tree, it just is, which means know it as the experience that is presenting. Just know the experience, which is, I'm not even going to put words on it. Without that deepening into the still, it's still because you can be aware of the world and it is what it is. There's no need to make a story out of it. We are compelled to make stories about what this means about me, and what it means about what it means about me is what it means about the me that I've always known myself as, this physical entity. As soon as there is a revealing that there can be an awareness of this present moment without labeling it, a direct knowing of it, meaning a direct awareness of it as something not separate from that which is aware of it. As soon as that happens, then the identity of who we are changes. And the circumstance doesn't mean what it meant to the identified individual. The identified individual has a story all the time about what, someone's look means about me, and what, the outcome of a certain judgment or decision that someone made, whether it was a good decision, a good judgment or not. And knowing ourselves as awareness means the judgment, the decision, let's say, to employ someone, to hire someone or not to hire someone, and let's say you were the one to be hired or not, from the place of awareness, the decision just is, and life carries on. So there's no involvement in the decision. And from the place of awareness, if someone were to get angry with you or say something sharp, from the place of awareness, it is what it is. There is no story. So, be of the world or be in the world but not of it is basically be aware of the world but not involved in it. And that's not an instruction to the individual saying, oh, you, the individual, don't be involved in things, because when the individual has this identified consciousness, there's no choice but to be involved in the world, meaning to get involved in what other people think, what other people say about the events that happen. And that involvement is a horizontal involvement in our thinking over time. It's not really talking about don't get involved in terms of a functional. So if a tap is on, the body can turn the tap off. That's not what involvement means. Involvement means a whole story about who left the tap on, why is the tap on, I turned it off, look what a good job I did, but what a bad job you did. So the stories, the involvement, can slow down. And as that slows down, then the world can be seen from a place of more silence, which means we know ourselves as awareness. Now, what does so a family member of mine last week mentioned they went to a kirtan evening, that they love kirtan, and they haven't been for a while, and they went, and the vibe is upbeat and heartfelt, and can take us into a very particular state. And so the feedback was that there was this sense of being outside of the body and not really being the body. And in that state, there was a sort of forgetting about the world for a while. And what they meant by forgetting about the world is any cares or concerns or worries or involvement that was outside of the room fell away. And you might be able to get a sense is that through the chanting, but it's not really because of the chanting. The chanting just helped bring that person into what we can call presence. And it demonstrated experientially to them how temporary, in a way, our experience of ourself and the world is, but it doesn't appear temporary when it's consistently one way, consistently involvement and worrying about this and taking things personally and thinking that various things are very important. If it consistently is like that, we may not have any appreciation that it is temporary, that it isn't what we could say your true nature, that it isn't the only way. And so then the person goes into kirtan, and combination of things reveals something different. And the word was, there was a freedom. The word used is there was a great freedom. And what it was a freedom from identification as a body, as a person that needed to be involved in how life was turning out, how it turned out in the past, how it's going to turn out in the future. And there was a letting go that the person didn't do. The person dissolved, essentially. And so what I'm talking about when I'm using the word person, it was the sense of the person, the involvement, the identification as the person, and then the involvement in the past and the future and the present, leading to regret about the past, complaining about the present, and expectation and fear about the future. And all of that, the psychological personhood dissolves. And when that personhood dissolves, the awareness reveals itself, and it can express itself as much bigger than the body and appear as if it's outside of the body. And that essentially is our true nature. So if we find ourselves returning to that place, which means the seeking has to have opened those doors and brought us to a place where there is, in time, less and less involvement and more awareness and beingness of just what is arising right now. Which also involves the reduction of, if we find ourselves thinking about, what someone did and getting very involved in fixing that and telling them what you think, and feeling like you have to get some sort of justice or correct the situation if they're thinking about you in the wrong way or whatever. Just if we realize that's involvement, and there can be a stopping. Just stop, meaning it's not important. It seems like it's important. That's the misunderstanding. That's the identification, to carry on thinking that way. But at some point, our system starts to see, no, that's the suffering. Stop. And just for a moment, the stop can say, I don't need to set things straight. It is what it is. It doesn't matter really. And there can be a silence. Now, what we'll do is we'll find that we get dragged back into that, maybe a second or 5 seconds after the silence sits in. It's like suddenly we go back and we might not even realize we've been dragged back in. The thinking has started happening again about how important it is. I'm going to write them a letter, or I'm going to sit down and have a conversation with them. And then you realize there it is. Stop. Stop basically means become aware of the present moment, where none of that is important. That thinking that that's important is actually the frenetic movement that prevents us from being what we truly are. And there's a freedom in our beingness. So this family member experienced the freedom. The person dissolved. I mean, the body was still there in the room, but there was no real awareness, no focusing on the body. The awareness became aware of itself primarily, and there was a freedom of the essence, that awareness doesn't need a whole lot of things to have happened a particular way or to happen another way. That's why there is an openness, a silence, an emptiness in knowing ourselves directly as that. And as seekers, hopefully that silence from the thinking mind starts to present, and then there's a snowballing of that, where there's a motivation to rest as that. Whenever there is a recognition that we're not resting as that, and the most important thought that we might be having, that we think is most important, can get cut off mid-thought by the understanding, it's not really important. In fact, it is very unimportant. It's very important for that to stop without insisting on it, because we're not in control of ultimately whether it does stop in that moment or not. But as the seeking develops, we will find that a cutting off of thinking, and thinking gets cut off when attention comes into the present moment outside of thought. So when we are thinking about this situation that has happened and how we have to fix it and set the other person straight, that is awareness identified with that thinking. And so we could argue that the thinking is in the present moment, and so actually there never is anything other than awareness of the present moment. Let's see the present moment as come back to the actual what's in the room here. And it's just a shift of attention back to, you can just look at the wall. But not look at the wall as a singular object, but look at, hopefully awareness can see all of the walls and all of the books on the bookshelf and the picture on the wall, all as one singular arising, rather than the body object looking at another object, but rather awareness aware of the whole present moment, including the body, the room and the body, and any thoughts and any words that are happening, all arising inside the consciousness that essentially is what we are, the only truth. there is. So I just see there's 4 hands up. So I'll take some questions, starting with Francois.
Hi, Roger. Okay, you hear me?
Yes, hi, Francois. I can.
Hi. Okay. I have for once I had a question for you to see what thought you have on some things that I feel that I trigger the doership in me, in my system.
Mm.
It's most of the time when I am disturbed with some neighbors who are acting doing some noise at a time that they will suppose not to do if they were quite educated. And I was feeling each time that it triggers my uncomfortableness with that, because it's kind of I realized, I thought about it, like some kind of disrespect of what my system consider is myself. And because I'm quite someone who is quite strong and with a strong character, I don't let people walk on my feet easily. And each time my body feels the urge to act on doing something about it, if he can. So if I can go see them and say, please, it's a bit late, can you just be quiet, please? He feels that he has to do it. And in the same times, even when it goes well, there is still this left uncomfortableness who keep on going a little bit, because he has triggered also some kind of fear about the outcome. Like it could happen something that it could be bad, and I have to do something about it, because I will not maybe let it go easily. And the only thing that make it different a bit is like I'm curious about this feeling inside me, and so it brought some investigation. And it's always some kind of because of them I can think about it, and it's interesting to see how this doership is still in me. And I was wanting to know, what do you think about this thing about respect, and when you feel that someone is, in a sense, by his behavior, is attacking yourself. Where does it place it? I know that it's blame, and also maybe some kind of guilt about, are you sure that you are enough strong? Something like that, you know?
Yeah, it's a good point. Let's see.
Maybe I'm gonna add something. I think because of how I have when I was young, I felt something like it was important for me to be strong, to defend myself, I think, against the world, but also to protect people I liked. I had some kind of responsibility to be strong enough, and fear was here all the time about, are you strong enough? And if you are not strong, what will happen? And fear was as becoming some kind of aversion for me. I didn't stand to feel fear, and I had to manage with that. And so I accepted, like, okay, even if I feel fear, it doesn't restrain me to be strong in some situation, because I have some kind of I will say mushin. You know the term mushin? It's a Japanese term, like without mind, with no mind.
Right. Okay.
So when
Yep.
I do some kind of martial arts, my personal martial art, and I have always been in some kind of state of mushin when I play with it or when I fight. And so it was like, I feel fear, but it doesn't make a difference in my action, so it's okay. But still, fear was something, if I could be rid of it, I will prefer.
Yeah. So I don't actually think that the fear is something that you will get rid of. I think the need to confront is more likely to fall away. Now, I appreciate that what you're saying is in your current structure, that isn't the case. There is a movement to confront. I was much more confrontational in the past than I am now. And what I see is that it was very dangerous, actually, to be confrontational. Because even if you're strong, and I wasn't, but I'm not particularly big, and so there are only a few people that are really the strongest. Most of us are not strong, and even if you're strong in a fight, you can get hurt. So the best thing is to not fight when there is clarity, or not clarity, when you can make an objective decision. The movement is move away, ignore it. Even if someone is disrespectful to you, with an objective opinion, you just walk away, because who cares, really? I mean, I understand that we could care, but what does it really mean if someone says you're an ass, right? It's a word. Now, we will hear it, and then we won't be able to drop it or walk away until we can. And when we can, we realize, oh, this is much safer and much better, basically. And you might know it in martial arts, even though martial arts is about fighting, the first rule is, if you can walk away, if you can get away, not fight. And then the fighting is secondary if you have to. Now, our psychology prevents us from walking away when we can walk away. Now, if that psychology weakens, I think we will walk away and not feel bad about it. If someone disrespects me or my girlfriend, let's say, I would rather walk away and let the disrespect have happened. But I won't walk away and feel, oh, I was, trampled on, I was weak, I was a coward, I was afraid. Because actually, I would be, if anything, I would say, wow, that was a great move, because I know the other is dangerous. So that's the first part of my answer. Now, but that's not what you're dealing with. You can't make that happen, right? Because what you're describing is just a consequence of the internal structure. But talking about it, and then your investigation, which you're already doing because you're interested in this, may lead to this. So on the question of respect, who says we need to be respected? When we look at it, we'll see it's a concept of ours. It's a concept, one, because we have let's say the tendency to be respectful. So I imagine you have the tendency to be respectful to others. And because you have a tendency, you might actually then have, obviously you have that tendency because it is a preference in you to be respected. So you say, do unto others as I would have them do unto me, right? So you will respect others because you want to be respected. And it can, and that is fine as a biological preference, but it's very easy for us to become identified with that and then set it up as an expectation where we expect the other to be respectful. And so to me, if we can look at this and say, why do I expect the other to be respectful? And we can say, one, because it is nice. I'd much rather receive respect than disrespect. But nice is a pleasure. So yes, I would prefer respect over disrespect because it's more pleasurable. But then we have to see where we have turned it into an expectation. And as soon as we have an expectation, then when the expectation isn't met, it will require us to resist the fact that our expectation hasn't been met. As soon as our expectation falls away, because we see we have an expectation and we see that it is just us telling God how God should be, and then we laugh at that and we say, actually, whenever I have an expectation, it's telling the world, the life, how it should be. And that's not how life will be. Life will be. Life will be how it will be. So we realize expectation just leads to suffering. We have to ask us, who says they should be respectful to us? I say that. My thinking says that. And then there can be the potential for us to say, that's actually ridiculous of me to say they should be respectful. It is, we can say, I would like them to be respectful. It would be pleasurable. This investigation and seeing that we have an expectation, which is just a concept, it can be very useful, I think.
Yeah, I think that the way I deal with that, and in a sense, it's also how I transform this situation in an opportunity for me to discover that there is still some doership in my system, and because of I even if the fear is here, I have a very confidence in my capacities, but most of it is because I am very confident in destiny, and so it's always something like it put in front of me the fact that it doesn't matter if I'm strong enough or strong or not, because it will not prevail on my destiny. Even if I was very strong, if I have to be hurt, I will be hurt. And if I was weak, if I have not to be hurt, I will not be hurt. So it's very clear for my mind, I will say my intellect, but my body is still like you should be more. You should not feel fear, and sometimes my intellect doesn't agree with this statement about not feeling fear, because I say I can feel whatever it is, but still there is some kind of the fear doesn't match the truth I'm supposed to know, and it's also some kind of reminder that your knowing, your understanding means nothing. It means only when it has an effect on you. But when your understanding has no effect on your peace, it's like you don't understand. That's all.
Yes. There are a couple of things that arise from what you're saying that I think are important. Like this idea about destiny. I know exactly what you say because I had it. and it changed. Not so much that I think I think destiny will happen, as destiny will happen for sure. But my thought used to be, I used to ride a motorcycle, and I didn't like wearing didn't like wearing a helmet, and I had this thought that, whatever's going to happen is destiny, and so I sort of felt okay not wearing a helmet, until I realized, wow, that's if my destiny is to then start wearing a helmet. If I have the impulse to put a helmet on, I said, well, that's destiny too. And that if I have an accident and you have a helmet on, because life and life is destiny, because destiny is apparently causal, like it follows, the storyline follows rules of causality, like A seems to cause B in appearance. So I then said, if destiny puts a helmet on and there is an accident, the story is most likely going to be the helmet will prevent head injury if the accident includes head hitting the ground. And a correction to this, oh, it's all destiny, so I don't need to worry, it happened. And once I started wearing a helmet, I looked back and I thought, how lucky, which was my destiny, right? That I didn't get into an accident. Now, we could say it wasn't luck, it was just you were not destined to get into an accident. But this ties very much into the story of everything is God's will. And the person, you might have heard me say, the person who was in the flood and the rain started rising and a jeep came past and said, quick, come, we'll take you to higher ground. No, I trust in God. And then come in, we'll take you to high ground. No, I trust in God. The waters kept rising. He was on the roof of the house and a helicopter came and dropped a line and said, come on, I'll take you to higher ground. No, I trust in God. And then he drowned and went to heaven and he said to God, what happened? I trust in you. And you didn't save me. And he said, well, I sent you a jeep, I sent you a boat, I sent you a helicopter. What more do you want me to do? And it's very good joke, parable, story to try and show us you can't trust in God in an impractical way. Trust in destiny, but be practical, which means trust in God, but lock your door. Trust in God, but tether your camel is the old saying. Trust in God, but tie up your camel. Because if you leave the camel untied and say, oh, it's God's will, it's my destiny, you'll come out and you'll find it's your destiny that the camel has gone. And so trust in God, but don't get into fights unless it's your destiny that you have to get into a fight. Trust in God, but wear a helmet when you're riding a bike. Now, this doesn't mean you have to insist that you don't get in fights, because you might not be able to help it. And I'm sure you don't get into fights, but you stand up for yourself. Maybe that leads to something, but I'm sure you just want to stand up for yourself. But that can lead somewhere. So if possible, let's not do that. But if it happens, obviously you have the right attitude of that's just destiny happening. And if you got into an accident, I'm sure you'd have the attitude, this is destiny, but it's a destiny that's less preferable. But it's destiny, yeah. But if you can prevent it, which is not really you preventing it, it's destiny preventing it by destiny making something a bit different, then, and this is all destiny. Your question is destiny. My answer is destiny, and what happens after is destiny. Does that make some sense?
I trust destiny, sorry, to make me make the good choice. I will say according to a favorable outcome, of course. And so I know that wisdom is a part of my system, and so I don't get into fight. I never fight, and especially because I'm some kind of confident in myself that I don't need to prove myself. The thing is fear. If I walk away from a fight or from a situation that could end it in a fight with some kind of cowardness feeling, it might not be agreeable, that's all. But most of the time, even when I feel fear, I don't feel like I am afraid. It's just like a body reaction, a biological reaction. My knees are shaking and my guts are something and all this, but it's just natural reaction.
And the adrenaline, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't mind. It's more sometimes in fact, I wanted to say also because of your topic today, for me as a French, is English language about using the word mind as a verb also when do you mind or I don't mind. And it's like some kind of a synonym of disturbing. Are you disturbed by something or are you not disturbed? And it was funny for me to see that it's the same word, mind, and what we can say some kind of so what you could say in English, the mind. And when I feel this all this uncomfortableness, or even we could say some kind of subtle suffering, I don't mind because you know how I see life about being all a program, and so it's just because of through your teachings, it make me a bit interesting about there is some doership left over inside me, despite the comprehension, and it was always interesting to see how it goes and how it's gonna go out or not go out. But I have never felt like it has to go out. I didn't care.
Yes, sure, because there is, the acceptance of the suffering as happening. But eventually, even so, there is a peace in that. But if the primary suffering dissolves altogether, that is a more full peace. Not that we should say, I want the more full peace, because then there will be more suffering. So the acceptance of suffering when it happens is much more peaceful than the resistance of suffering. That is the definition of peace, to accept the suffering, the primary suffering, the small suffering. In your case, small, just not so big. Eventually, even that can go. We don't need it to go, because then that would be more suffering, but it can go even if you don't need it to go. It's the movement. Now, consider that you confronting the other is actually you doing what they are doing to you, delivering pain. And the way we look at it is, well, they're hurting me, so I can defend myself. At some point we see, I don't want to be aggressive. They don't, you don't want them, they're being aggressive to you, in this case, by playing loud music. At some point we say, I don't want to hurt them. Because just like in the Bible, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. Which really means, Father, forgive them, they can't do it differently. And so correcting someone actually is a form of aggression. It's trying to change them. It is an aggression. And as we realize these nuances and see them for what they are, like really see, oh yes, it is aggressive to want the other person to be different, then that is a piece that is part of the realization that dissolves that impulse. But while it's there, then, as you said, the acceptance of it and the non-resistance of it is a gift.
Yeah, I think I will be if I am like Arjuna, a warrior, I will act as a warrior. And
yes.
to add the last thing, like Bruce Lee said in the movie, I do not eat, it eat by itself.
Yes.
And so
yeah,
I don't have, as you will say, some kind of principle of having an attitude of non-violent person. I am not violent, and I could be violent, but I'm not violent. I'm not violent, but I don't keep this standard like it was good things to be like that. I am what I am, and yes. I'm fine with it.
You are neither violent nor non-violent, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
I am that I am.
And just to finish, and after I'll let you with other people, when you say all the time the only truth in this life, it's the impersonal sense of I am. And I see what you mean by that, because it's not about the words exactly. It's about the feeling of existence and all this. And for me, it was more like the only truth I can really see is the what you say about what is, that there is something. We cannot deny that there is something. And is it a sense of I am? Is it a sense of existence, of presence? I don't know exactly, but there is something, and that's true. And other things are concept on this truth. What do you think about
that? The impersonal sense of I am is what you are when you are neither holding the idea of non-violence or violence. When there is the absence of being either a violent person or a non-violent person, that is impersonal sense of I am, because that is you knowing yourself outside of this or that. Okay. So that is where that is the impersonal sense of I am.
Okay. Thank you, Roger.
You're welcome, Francois. Thank you for the questions. Good topic. Kyla, hi.
Hi, Roger. Thank you for your presence. Well, until until I ask my question, actually, I got some answers from your satsang and your conversation with Francois. But as I get the answers, other questions are rising, so I'm going to ask it. Well, I used to have a very busy life. I work a lot. I had a 9-to-5 job. I had side projects. I raised 2 children. I put them to school. I traveled. I changed 3 countries, etc., etc. And in 2019, everything has changed, and I got laid off, and the bank entered my account because I had some debt. So they paid themselves and left me with zero, but I had no debt. So, and when I come to today, of course, my seeking, since it's been 3 years, it intensified because I made the decision of I'm not going to work anymore, and my children were grown enough. So I announced that you're going to have to work and pay your own rent and your school. And actually, maybe that put them in their own path of taking care of themselves. What's happening today is, as you were speaking in your satsang today, there is nothing is happening, like good or bad. There is total emptiness. I have all the time in the world to just sit in silence, which I like very much, but there is a slight tiny little question of if I am, because I wake up and I listen to myself, what do I want to do today? I used to be a very creative person. I like writing, I like reading, but I don't feel like doing anything. And the question is, am I hiding behind non-doership? Meaning, okay, I'm not a doer. I don't feel like doing anything, so I'm just not going to do anything. Which I sort of understood today is that maybe my mind and my manifestation created this whole thing 3 years ago, which opened space to me to be more present and more silent and go inwards, which I do. But there is this question, because I used to be very productive, so I am feeling a tiny guilt of, well, I sat around all day and did nothing, but I wasn't thinking. I was maybe meditating, maybe not meditating, just sitting in silence or just walking in nature. But I'm so used to doing things. I used to have to-do lists and getting so much done. And so that's my first question. And within that, there is also a tiny little bit of boredom. And there is a tiny little bit of waiting for something to happen in terms of enlightenment and liberation. And I feel that that's a trap. There is something that's preventing me to accept this, which is probably a luxury, and be okay with it, and go inward and just be silent and keep meditating. There's no pain, no pleasure. I mean, there's pleasure in the sense that everything is okay, so that's pleasant. My kids are okay, I have a roof over my head, I have food, I have friends, so that's pleasure. But you know what I mean. So I was wondering, what would be your advice in terms of boredom and that waiting, just getting out of that feeling, waiting for something to happen because nothing is happening, or maybe something is happening. I'm not aware of it. I don't know.
So today's satsang was about how we actually have to break the cycle that has become the norm and our habit and how we roll, essentially, which is busy, needing to do things, needing to have what seems like a full life, afraid of missing out on things, wanting to be able to have a list or a collection of things that we can say, this is this is what I have to show for life. And that seems like a very good direction to go in. It seems like that's the direction where I'm going to find contentment, where I'm going to find happiness. And we do it for long enough, and for some people, they realize, no, that's not where we will find happiness. And that's what can be the motivation to do it differently. So I think it's a godsend when we see one life change and deliver the opportunity for us to do it differently. Part of that change often includes a lack of motivation, right? Because if we had this motivation, we would basically be doing and be busy again. And so the fact when we find ourselves with a lack of motivation, I think it has something to do with the process, where in a way it's keeping you at home, preventing you from wanting to go out and socialize too much and go out and do things that you previously were excited about doing, probably because you thought you would get something that now you realize you wouldn't get from it. So it sort of turns you into a monk or a nun in a way, right? Your house becomes your monastery. It gives you space. And that's very valuable. What I would also add to that is that this journey of self-discovery is probably the most valuable by far project that you can devote yourself to. And so what looks like an unproductive day, you know, what you said, but I didn't do very much. When looked at as the journey of self-discovery, it is a very valuable activity, if you want to call it that. And the process of self-discovery also includes a surrender to the fact, if I'm sitting on the couch, it is God's will for me to be sitting on the couch. You know, it's my concept, my expectation that says I should be, you know, delivering things that I can say, this is what I have to show for myself. That is a thought, it's an expectation. And so a surrender to, if the feeling is that I want to sit on the couch and meditate, or just sit on the couch and sleep, or watch a movie, we need to be able to surrender to, that is God's will. That impulse is God's will, and it's God's will for me to be watching the movie. Now what that does is it means that our guilt and our shame for not being productive can start to be interfered with. And that's a very important thing, because this idea about needing to be productive is very much linked with attachment to outcomes. So there are several concepts that I think you can start looking into, seeing if your thinking, which is leading to guilt, is one not valuing silence and slowing down and seeing that that is part of the journey, and realizing that that movement is the most precious project we can dedicate ourselves to. And two, not surrendering to watching a movie being God's will, and having a day when you don't produce things is God's will. Now these teachings, depending on how they're heard on the other side, can lead to a chaotic outcome, a disastrous outcome for some people. Because the ego hears the teachings, and the pointings never take that seeker, let's say, outside of a conceptual understanding, which is not really an understanding. And it basically, the pointers get hijacked by the doer that takes its form as, I am not the doer. So it becomes the identity holds just a concept, I am not the doer, and it ends up leading into complacency, it ends up leading into depression, and that is destiny if that happens. But I throw this in as a sort of warning to someone who might feel, yes, that's where I am. I'm bypassing life using these concepts, and it's not creating insight, it's not creating more freedom, it's not creating more peace. And then we have to question whether that path is appropriate for that particular person. I'm not necessarily suggesting for you, but for some people, it may not be an appropriate path. It may be that those teachings can't really be heard by the person. For people who do hear the concepts, what you describe as in how their life starts to turn out, where there is a period of no motivation to do very much outwardly, is very much how the understanding manifests. And it is understanding, and it is a process of change. And there are many people, or at least myself, and I know of others, but I say myself, where these teachings, the way they landed, didn't lead to chaos at all. They led to liberation. And so it isn't the teaching that is the problem, because if it was the teaching that is the problem, it wouldn't ever lead to liberation for some people. It's how the teaching is heard and processed and interpreted, which is destiny essentially, and is very subjective and depending on, the seeker, and factors out of our control, factors out of the seeker's control. So there very much is, even in a process where there is much movement in the right direction, bypassing in effect is going to happen, where a concept is taken too literally, and leads to us essentially getting off track. But within a process where the seeker is very much on a process of deeper understanding, that ends up becoming the point where the correction happens, right? You go off track, it starts to feel like I'm off track, and then there is a seeing of how the bypassing has happened, and then that gets corrected. So my sense is that you're not lost. You're not a lost seeker. The process is working, and there will be times when we do get off track, but it will self-correct, simply by you feeling that you're off track. One of the concepts in the teaching is, in each moment, do exactly what you feel like doing. That is a concept that is really aimed at someone who feels they are being lived, they are really being pushed down and guided down a process, and that it is working, and it isn't taking them into a place that is disastrous. And so if you find yourself in that position, I say, just do what you feel like doing and trust that. If you don't feel like responding to an email, it doesn't matter that someone is going to say, you're so rude, you didn't reply to my email. Go, and no, I didn't reply to your email because I didn't feel like it. And I'm not going to do what I don't feel like. Even if you insist that I do, who says I should reply to your email? And then we start to realize how many shoulds and shouldn'ts we have in place that prevent us from doing what we feel like. And there's a great liberation when we realize this, that we say, no, I'm just going to do what I feel like. And when that kicks in, where you essentially can't anymore do anything that you don't feel like, which really is where you really feel like you're being lived, you stop interfering with what the thinking stops interfering, and you just say, I am being lived in each moment. And I would say for the last 20 years, I in each moment have done exactly what I feel like doing. And so if I got told you have a incurable illness and you will die in a month's time, I'll say, I always knew life was going to come to an end. That is life. And I've had a blessed life that for my whole life virtually, but especially in the last 20 years, I have lived life doing in each moment exactly what I felt like doing. And to me, that is something I can't have any regrets about life when I find myself being moved that way. So that's something I would encourage you to explore. And all of these things are explorations. If it doesn't feel right, you correct it, you change it, because these are just concepts, not the truth. It was very important for me to do this, to not do anything I didn't feel like. And it ended up refining itself in a way where I find myself to be quite responsible, quite considerate of the other. Still, emails will come in. I would like to answer them because I know the other person would like it. Sometimes I do, and if I really don't have an impulse, I let it be. And I look at it and I say, it's my destiny to not answer not to have the impulse, not to answer the email. And it's the other person's destiny not to get an answer. And really, at the end of the day, at worst, it's pain in the moment for them. And that is not an attack on who they are. They might experience it as an attack on who they are, I sent an email, it was a simple question, I got no answer, how rude. And we need to be able to, I appreciate that they didn't get what they want. I appreciate, even according to the definition of polite or rude, yes, it can fit into the rude category. But that doesn't mean I'm going to do it because I must not ever be rude. Because if I take on the I must never be rude, then I will do what I should do, right? I will reply to emails, I will be in a certain job, I will live life according to a set of shoulds and shouldn'ts. And that takes me off the track of being lived the way I currently am, which I think is a blessing.
And how do you differentiate? How can I differentiate that my impulses is not coming from my ego, but myself, which is what I'm supposed to do, and it's not my ego is doing it? How can I separate, understand that?
You might not be able to, even if it is coming from the doership. Resisting that is more doership. So if it's really strong, even if it's coming from doership, surrender to it and understand that is God's will, that is destiny. And from that place, so a lot of people will say, no, that's going to make you do a lot of unhelpful things. And I think if you've got that surrender, if it does lead to outcomes that are not favorable, you will see that pattern. And then from that pattern, you will start to see this is keeps leading to certain outcomes. And I'm not necessarily talking about simply functional outcomes, because you can make a decision that's not from the ego, and it doesn't mean it's always going to be a great outcome, right? You can make an investment that's not from the ego and still you can lose money. But you might start to see a set of outcomes that are psychological or involvement type of outcomes, or consequences that you see, a pattern. And you'll only see that pattern if this witnessing essentially, because the witnessing is there if you feel like it and you allow it to just be what is unfolding, then there's not much involvement. It is just life happening. And so there's a strong amount of witnessing. And from that witnessing, the pattern recognition can happen much more objectively than when we tend to be involved and trying to decide or trying to judge whether we should or we shouldn't. So my suggestion is you can't really tell at first whether it's coming from doership or, well, sometimes you can, but sometimes you can't. And just allow it to happen, and the pattern recognition will soon show you which ones that you couldn't tell are from doership. And then when they come up again, then you'll start to know, oh, this is from doership. And if you find that in a particular moment you're on the fence and you can, choose to do that or choose to do something different, if that's the impulse, if you know it is from doership, you will maybe choose to not go down that path, because in that moment you've got the choice. There are going to be times when you know something is from doership and it comes up where there is no choice. In a way, it's like to not do it, you really will have to be swimming against the tide. And that to me then is almost like doership in the opposite direction, and it becomes hard work. And I would just say at some point just surrender and allow yourself to go down that other path of doing something that is from doership with an attitude of surrender. And in time, you find that most of the time you'll choose differently, and eventually the doership impulse stops arising.
Mm-hmm. One last add, which I'm also, as I listen to you, I understand when I do something out of doership, I also feel some physical movement in my body that I don't feel good. I feel nervous, or I get emotional, I get belly aches or headaches, which can also maybe help me to understand that this is coming from doership, because I don't feel comfortable, but I still want to do it. There's the impulse of wanting to do that. But if my body doesn't feel right, maybe that's also a signal for me to understand that's coming from doership.
Yeah, I think we start to develop a deeper sensing, and once we start to learn the signs, then it then starts to be part of your decision-making process, the understanding the signs, and the whole thing deepens, and these decision or these movements start to become much more spontaneously in the direction of non-doership driven, so non-attachment driven movements. But at first, or when there is still attachment in the system, then we are going to find ourselves faced with these decisions, and at times we're just going to have to surrender to doing what you feel compelled to do in that moment, even though you realize it's coming from doership.
Okay. Thank you so much, Roger. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
You're very welcome. We've hit the time, and there's still 3 hands up, and if I were to answer those questions, we'd go till 12 o'clock. So Raghu, Suzanne, and John, next week I'll prioritize you if you still put your hands up, so hope you understand. Thank you all for joining, and Peace.